Hi everybody, I just finished looking at some of your documentation and research work that you've done in the discussions for week 6. We're in week 6, right? Yes. Okay, so I thought it'd be really interesting to do a quick video for you on the differences between primary and secondary research, which you should already know, but this is just a little bit of a reminder. In addition to showing you a website that I wanted to share called Vetting Author, well, the website's called Researching Treasure Leads. I got this from another faculty member that I teach with that showed me the site, and I thought the site was fantastic. And I wanted to go over this with you. I think that I'm going to include this link under the video. I think that this is really a helpful, kind of fun and silly site that talks about the way you can think about finding academic quality out on Google, not or on a Bing search and a Yahoo search outside of like the library databases. Depending on the topic that you write about, you're often going to have to do Google oriented research. Now, Google is just a search engine. It's not your actual source, and I see that most of you really do understand that concept. So this is going to be a very easy refresher mini discussion for you. So I want to go to this little document first. Now, the differences between primary research and secondary research, those are terms that you're going to hear quite a bit coming up, and you're going to be doing secondary research for the majority of your undergraduate careers. As you move on to graduate school, many of you will be going to graduate school. As you move on to graduate school, the shift will go from probably 90-20, secondary is 90% of the work you do as an undergraduate, to maybe like 70-30. Okay, so primary research is the work that you're looking at of others in the library databases. So if you found an article in the Journal of Management Information Systems and somebody talked about they did a research, or they performed research on 3,000 college sophomores and they studied their habits for surfing the web, that study is primary. They didn't find that information anywhere else. They developed the study. They came up with the methods. They gathered the students to be researched. They decided which students could be included in the study and which couldn't. They not just gathered the data, but they analyzed the data and they presented you with their results. Okay? So that's their primary research, their gathered data, their surveys. If you're doing social science research, you'll quite often hear about a term called participant observation. That's when an anthropologist or a sociologist goes into the field and they study groups of people. Then they come back and they share that research with us. Often that research is published in journals. Once we access those journals, it becomes secondary research. We didn't come up with the data, but we're borrowing the data, right, from other sources. So this includes everything else. This includes any article in the library. This includes newspaper article, website content, TV shows, etc. So what we're training undergraduates to do is to see how professional researchers and writers gather and gather, study, and report back on their findings. As you move through your paces and you go from, the 100, the 200, the 300, the 400 level, you're going to start to ease into, especially if you go into business and social science careers, gathering a lot of data on your own. And you do that actually right now. If you're in a biology class or a chemistry class, you'll find that those classes often have a lab component, and then you're doing research, you're studying, you're getting those Bunsen burners, and you're heating up one. I sound like such an English dork right now, but you're taking one chemical and you're combining it with other chemicals, and you're watching and reporting on those reactions, right? Researchers do that in primary research, but they're combining. Think about cancer researchers, where they're taking new medications that they're putting through their paces and they're applying it to cancer cells, for example. Once they publish those findings, those published findings for everyone else becomes secondary research. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time in this class so far looking at the library databases and determining, well, what's appropriate for a scholarly or academic source. Well, in the library databases is pretty easy. You can toggle to full article in scholarly journal or peer-reviewed journal, and it's going to narrow the database to journals of biologists who are evaluated by other biologists. It's not like somebody who has a blog article. I have a blogger account. I could post on statistics. I could post on astronomy. I am an expert on neither. But I could do that, but there's nobody fact-checking my work. But at least in those peer-reviewed journals, the work's being fact-checked. So through trying to sort of explain to students what the value is in secondary research, well, say, you're doing research on small businesses and you find somebody who has a website about their small business and they have a little background about us, and you find some information. That could be helpful. It could be that anecdotal evidence of that one person account. It's not going to be data on 25 different businesses if it's just one small business's website. But anecdotal data can contextualize a bigger piece of data that you get maybe from the Library of Congress or from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So having a multitude of sources, like you will have in your cause or effect paper, is good. It shows your range. It shows your ability to credential sources. And if one of your sources is an opinion piece, for example, you can find other sources that are more data-driven to balance that out, so the preponderance of evidence that you provide works for your argument and it doesn't look like you're cherry-picking evidence or that you're biased. So let me show you Researching Treasure Leads. Now, this is a website that I believe is a guy who was an engineer by trade who likes to hunt for treasure as a hobby. Some of us do puzzles or play Minecraft or watch the Broncos, and other people hunt for treasure of Sierra Madre. But what's so much fun about this is that this guy who goes by, I think he goes by the screen name Van Helsing, which just makes me laugh as a literature dork. The information is really applicable to academic research. So what he's saying is, if you are interested in history and you're interested in like Spanish galleon treasure or what have you, there are actual ways to go through historical government documents and other documents and books to determine value of a source that may help you find what was left behind by some bank robber in the late 19th century. So what he's saying here is actually really helpful for you as you evaluate content outside of the library databases. So, okay, this does not apply to primary, only to secondary sources. So you can see here that he knows his academic research stuff, and this is it's not tongue-in-cheek, but it's very informally discussed, so take it with a grain of salt. But trust me when I say that I think that Van Helsing's methods can really help you when you're doing your own academic research. Okay, he says vetting of authors of secondary sources is a bit more complicated. Secondary source authors analyze, interpret, and deconstruct events to find patterns and then tell you their conclusions as if it were fact. Sometimes secondary sources just extrapolate their favorite theories and pet peeves and present them as divine canonical works from above. That would be like somebody's random blog. You must be on the lookout for a dusting of BS, partial BS, and full-on steaming BS. So what he's saying here is there's good, trustworthy information on the web, but it's not always good and trustworthy. You have to look for bias. You have to look for quality writing. You have to look for identifying factors of who the author is to determine, can I include the source in my own academic writing? He's saying, can you include it as part of your research for treasure? But we're saying, can you include it as part of your research for your cause-effect paper, for example? Because you have to have 3 academic sources, but the other sources you have can be from the web. Quality is important. He says, for evaluation of secondary source authors, I look for specific things and mentally add and subtract bonuses to the scorecard in my head. I will try to quantify it for others. So you don't have to use this method, but if you need this can be helpful. And he gives the good sources at the top and really bad sources at the bottom. +6 if the author is known to publish in peer-reviewed scholarly journals. That means their work has been vetted by others and it's trustworthy. Okay? +5 if written with citations that go to primary sources, or 2 for secondary citations. So if they have citations that go to their own primary research, and give it even more points if it goes to others' research. So if they name their sources clearly, they show their research, and they show others' quality research, that's 7 points altogether. +3 if it's hosted on a government or university website. And I've left you feedback so far, yes, saying for the vast majority of content, .govs and .edus are good. There's a lot of hoops you got to get. You got to be an actual government entity to get a .gov and to be a .edu as well. +2, if the article is hosted by a reputable news media like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Miami Herald, the Chicago Tribune, the LA Times, BBC. Al Jazeera is pretty good. The Guardian, right? If it's hosted by the Inquirer or TMZ, be cautious, be very cautious, right? If the author publishes other articles in non-peer-reviewed journals, so if the author is publishing in Scientific American, or if the author is publishing on the Huffington Post, or if the author is publishing somewhere else that's not peer-reviewed, but they're still publishing and their name is out there, trust them, but add these up. If the author publishes a contact mailing address, so there's somebody alive behind there, it's not like a sock puppet that is just hired to update a Wikipedia page, for example. If the author publishes a contact email, if it appears written for a scholarly audience, you can tell that by tone, you can tell that by phraseology, you can tell that by quality writing. Now, +2, if it originates from a government report. Now, if you're treasure hunting, a vintage government report can give you just as much information as a modern one. So depending on your topic, it depends. So if you're doing science research, modern government reports are much more important. But if you're doing historical research, modern and vintage are applicable. Now, to the minuses. -1 if it refers to any they or them or those people. Those coded words that talk about like a vague Illuminati or like Opus Dei group. -2 if they're hosted on a free web hosting site like Blogspot. Now, I have a website. I have a blog that I do with other classes on Blogger. It's free, and the issue is if it's free and they have built-in templates, it doesn't take as much time or effort, and so I think that's what Van Helsing is pointing out here. -4 if no author name is given to the article, unless it's a government report or an entity. So, for example, if something is published by UMUC under the aegis of the university, it doesn't have to have an individual's name. It's fine. -4 if the writing is poorly organized, if there are spelling and grammatical errors, all suggestive of superficial thinking and research. Absolutely right. Okay, so what he says he does is this. He starts at a default, everybody gets 5 points. And then you plus or minus based on the aggregate, adding everything else up together, right? So how do you interpret the total? -0 to 3, ignore the author. Don't let him walk your dog. And I love my dogs, so that made me laugh. 4 to 7, the author may have some credibility, but you got to be cautious. If your professor only wants you to use 1 or 2 sources, don't use these. They're not reliable enough. Okay, like websites like study.com, about.com, facts.com, eHow. Those are not academic websites. They're just generalist, Wikipedia-oriented type of content. And if the author's not explicitly named, don't use them. 8 to 14, it's safe to put faith in the author's credibility. But if it's 15 and up, like it's an academic author who publishes in multiple places, also published on a .edu, and you've got all of these little bits and pieces that you can put together, and you can string together the author's credibility, remember, your credibility is tied to the sources that you use. And sometimes adding an extra half an hour research can make or break your paper. It could take you from a low B to a low A, and that makes all the difference. So, again, I'm going to include this link in the below this little video, and as you keep writing your cause of paper, keep researching and reach out to me if you have questions. I will be working from home tomorrow. Hope to talk to you then.